Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a Sterling Archer cosplay build. So if you don't know, Sterling Archer is from the FX show Archer, and it's basically a parody of James Bond. It's supposed to be like the world's deadliest spy, but it's totally a joke. And this build is obviously going to be an Archer, so that's kind of part of the joke. And then we can go from regular Archer to Sterling Archer using Iron Jar Aromatic, which gives us a hardness attribute, which means hits will kind of glance off us, and we can go for Rain of Arrows, which is going to be this Ash of War that sends a bunch of high damaging arrows around our body. So that can be kind of a nice... Oh, it's almost like a gimmick associated with this build, but it's a pretty strong strategy. When it works, when it doesn't, it's obviously problematic, but that's kind of the idea behind the build. Taking a closer look at the build itself, we will be running this at meta on just a standard strength build. I didn't go into too much research to try to like min-max this too much, just because, you know, it's kind of a silly build. We are just wearing the bandit garb and bandit boots, which basically are the things that look most like what Burt Reynolds wore in Deliverance. And then we'll also have the trick mirror on so that we maintain our appearance when we're in Host's World. And then we have Arrow's Sting Talisman as well as Shard of Alexander. We might switch that over to something like Arrow's Reach or the Dagger Talisman, depending on what type of attacks we're going for. But we also have something like the Pulley Crossbow as well as a Misericord, and those things together will help us either deliver chip damage or burst damage, depending on what the situation calls for. I also did want to mention that I promised that I actually tried in character creation to make this look like Sterling Archer, but really this is how it ended up, which I feel like looks more like Prince Charming from Shrek with dark hair than Sterling Archer. So you can just kind of let me know about your disappointment in the comments below, but that's all I wanted to mention about the character creation. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the PvP content. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, things start off pretty rough. We're not able to get up the tree while we have iframes, and we're just getting hit by so many different attacks. Things are, you know, looking pretty bad, but in classic Archer style, we're able to kind of squirm our way out of a sticky situation and run off into a little bit more of a safe area where we can kind of go for some more tricky attacks and just try to take advantage of the silliness of this build. So you can see right away just how much damage everything does to me. So when you have the armor that you are wearing to look like Burt Reynolds, it's pretty difficult. Not having gloves or any type of helmet is going to mean your physical damage negation is quite low. And we are running a very minimal poise build. I think there's maybe like 13 or 23 poise on this build, and it's also medium roll, so we're not light rolling, which is one of the advantages that you may get in some cases if you are running a, you know, lighter build. But I find light roll to be just a little bit strong, so I wanted to avoid that for this build and just thought it'd be more fun to go for a medium roll build. So what we do here is try to back off and let the PvP do some chip damage and just kind of fire off shots and see if we're able to get some chip damage on our opponents. We also have another player using a bow, which is kind of interesting. We're hoping not to get poisoned here, but we are still getting hit with arrows, and while we're kind of focused on the one player, we're getting attacked by this second player with a heavy thrusting sword, which definitely is kind of scary, but I want to stay where I am. I want to stay on this branch. I don't want to come down where everybody can attack me at once, and I am able to pull off a nice parry with the dagger there and take care of that phantom. So that puts me in a much better spot. The ability to pressure with a heavy thrusting sword is quite strong, so being able to kind of reset and just have a bow build and a host in the mix is going to make things a little bit easier. And based on the warming stone that the phantom just put down, it may look like they don't have too much health left, so I'm kind of aware of that and hopeful that that's going to be a nice thing for me. And here I'm able to get a quick swap and grab a backstab on the host and just begin pressuring them, and they are kind of disconnected from their phantom, so I'm in a great spot here to really potentially win this invasion that started off pretty terribly. So I switch over to the Pulley Crossbow. I'm hoping to get some chip damage in there and just fire off a couple shots. I don't manage to kill them, so I start going for a couple quick attacks with the Misericord while the Phantom has just arrived, and here you can see that they're a little bummed, and we can see how happy Archer is. So that was a great 3v1, one that I wasn't really expecting to win, but was able to come out with the W. this next one, we've got some dogs that come in pretty quick and take care of the Phantom for me, so we'll be relying on PvP in this showcase a lot more than maybe you would typically see on my channel, and that's because this build requires kind of passive play. We can't be too aggressive, we're extremely squishy, and it's we don't have like a ton of burst damage, which you might normally expect. So there's something kind of weird happened where the arrow went like off to the side compared to where it was aiming. So I'm not totally sure what happened, but we are able to get just a free aimed headshot, which is pretty nice, and then get some additional chip damage with the pulley crossbow. So I definitely enjoyed using that, and then here we're able to hit them once while they're running in and kind of knock them to the ground and then get a second shot off that may have been a headshot. So a couple nice shots there with the mixture of both the Great Golem arrows as well as just the Radahn spears. So I like mixing that up and trying to go for both like the shots to the ground, which would knock my opponents over if I was using the Golem arrows, and then use the Radahn spears if I was going to go for a direct hit. So this next invasion, we do transfer over to the Sterling Archer build. We use the Iron Jar Aromatic and try to just bait our opponents in. They do quite a bit of damage, but we're able to roll away, and then we start drinking immediately. Obviously, if we stop drinking, the cumulative hangover will kill us, so we got to make sure that we keep our health topped off, and we're able to take care of 2 Phantoms simultaneously with the Iron Jar Aromatic mixed with Radahn's Rain. So it doesn't always work, but when it does, it's fantastic. So definitely a really fun element of this build was trying to bait people in with the Greatbow attacks, and then once they're all aggressive, switching over to Iron Jar Aromatic and getting that Radahn's Rain off can be pretty solid. So now we have to deal with the Mage, and the Mage has some attacks that are going to stun us, which can be fairly difficult to deal with. So we do get some chip damage in, but they are continuing to pressure. They also have switched over to Carrion Slicer, which is very scary on an extremely low poise build because every hit will stun you, and that can be difficult to deal with if you can't kind of get out of the way. So we do have a blue that also comes in that's also a mage, so I wasn't super thrilled to see that. I was a little bit worried that this kind of great intro with the 2 Phantoms getting killed by the same attack was going to be ruined, but then we actually have a Radahn Invader coming in, which I was thrilled to see. They managed to land a hit on the host, and I'm able to follow it up with a Greatbow attack that takes the rest of their HP, and it ends up being a successful invasion. So another solid one right there that I was very happy about. Next up we have a 3v1, and this one is a little bit awkward. So I wasn't sure if they had spotted me at first or not, but then I think they did spot me. So I go ahead and drink my Physic, which is kind of a dead giveaway that I'm in the world, and start going for chip damage with the Radahn's arrows. And I also do have Exalted Flesh on this build, and that was a great way to raise your AR. So it can be really nice to use Exalted Flesh before going for the Ash of War to just kind of boost that a little bit further. Really, you want to one-shot your opponent if you can with Radahn's Rain. It can be very tricky to kind of follow that up with additional pressure because it just takes so long to perform that Ash of War. So typically, if they've gotten hit, going after them is going to be a little bit more difficult. But here we are able to land Radahn's Rain and get 1 Phantom down, so it's pretty thrilled about that, and that does kind of attract some more attention from the Phantom and the host. I'm still delivering some Golem arrow hits, but I don't really have a ton of space to maneuver. I want to kind of lure them into small spaces where Radahn's Rain can be really effective, and they aren't super aggressive, so that's going to, again, put me in a good spot to use Radahn's Rain. And here I'm able to land it on the host. It one-shots them as well, and we do have the Phantom coming in. I do a decent amount of stamina damage as I hit them with that arrow, and so they go for a couple swings, and once their guard is up, their stamina is very low, so I'm able to deliver a guard break as well as a riposte. Next up we have a 3v1, and here they're fighting the tree avatar, and I'm able to go for just a direct hit here, which was very nice, landing that with the Golem bow, and then I go for another one, but they kind of pop out of range before I'm able to release that shot, so I switch my bows over to ones with Radahn's Rain of Arrows, which is going to be extremely helpful throughout this showcase, as you've kind of seen so far. And here they haven't noticed me yet. They're kind of chilling, so we're able to release that Ash of War and just finish off the last bit of health. Next, we kind of go for a more one-on-one approach with the host. it can be difficult to go for just the golem arrow attacks and chip damage with hosts. So I do try to grab some direct hits as well, but you are competing with quite a few flasks, and delivering consistent pressure with just arrow shots can be kind of hard. So I switch over to a parrying dagger, and at this point we've kind of traded some blows. Not too much has happened, so I skip ahead a little bit, and we do end up landing the parry just on their running attack. I find that the running attack is pretty predictable, and you can kind of start that parry animation as early as you need to, which is very helpful for going for dagger parries. The dagger parry comes out quite a bit later than something like carrying retaliation, so having that on hand is pretty useful. I definitely found more success with this build than I was expecting. I think the Rain of Arrows, Ash of War is something that, just can do so much damage that it makes it fairly possible to run a build like this. I wouldn't say that I'd, recommend it, but a more optimized version could potentially be pretty deadly. It's also not a playstyle that I'm that used to playing with. I'm much more aggressive and usually run melee attacks, but here we can just see Rain of Arrows coming in clutch, and we're able to take out a couple people. So I definitely like a more dynamic approach where I'm not, running away and delivering chip damage gradually over time. I definitely would prefer to be kind of up close and personal with my opponents and use the mechanics associated with poise trades and just, true combos in some cases, like with the Knight's Greatsword. That's a weapon that I really enjoy. But we can see here that just this Greatbow style play is pretty solid. The fact that we don't have any armor is very problematic when it comes to blood loss. Your blood loss meter is very small, so at meta level, having that can be kind of dangerous. But here we do get a nice shot off just with a helping hand, which comes in and helps us kill the host before the Phantom comes in and kills us. So that's a kind of a fun spot. This next invasion was one that I was very happy to win. It was difficult for a couple different reasons. So one is going to be that the host is using the Hand of Melania, which is not that bad to deal with on its own, but when you have really low poise, just so many hits will continue to stun you, and that ends up being problematic for your health quite a bit. So we also have them running a katana with Bloodhound Step, which just makes landing arrow attacks very, very difficult. So we kind of have to work around that, and then we also have a mage that is using some healing incantations as well as just applying pressure continuously. So here we can just see how much health goes away when they land that Hand of Melania attack. So I can't really blame them for spamming it. It was quite effective, but we do get some PvE involved, and then we switch over to a bow with Rain of Arrows. So there's slightly better AR on the Golem bow rather than the Greatbow or Radahn's bow. So that's kind of the rationale for switching over between different bows, but I was mostly just having fun. I didn't really go into too much depth when creating this character. I just, put things on that I thought would be pretty solid. So we do have some dual greatsword attacks coming in from the kind of mage character. They do have pretty low poise, which is helpful for the Misericord attacks. And I was hoping to grab a backstab right there, but just wasn't quite fast enough. And they are going for more healing incantations, which is a little bit of a bother. So I'm, not totally sure what to do. The consistent pressure from both the Phantom and the host are difficult to deal with, especially with this build, but I do manage to land a nice kind of turn and parry, which was really helpful in kind of relieving some of the pressure, but the Hand of Melania is still problematic. So I continue to kind of apply pressure with the Greatbow and just see if I can get more chip damage off. The host is doing a good job of trying to avoid these attacks by kind of hiding behind objects, which I can't really fault them for. And then the Bloodhound Step is, it's going to be a problem, especially with the amount of distance they can cover. So I kind of realized that I need to make a change. So I pull out the pulley crossbow. It's not doing as much damage as I was hoping because the iframes for Bloodhound Step are, still pretty strong. So we can see additional shots with the Greatbow still getting, hitting the ground and not hitting the opponent. So I switch over to Iron Jar Aromatic, and this was definitely the right play. So I managed to shoot them out of the air. I was having trouble getting the Ash of War to initiate. So there were a couple shots where I was expecting to be going for the Ash of War, like that was one right there, but instead it just pulled out the regular shot. So I switch over to the actual Lion's Bow, which I thought the issue was that I didn't have the right bow out, but this time I queue up the Ash of War way early, and I don't think they really understood what that crouch animation meant, which meant that I was able to kind of bait them into an attack. They go for Hannibalania one more time, and what was originally such a strong attack ends up being kind of their downfall. So I was very happy to kind of adjust to the play of my opponents in that invasion, figure out ways to get the burst damage I needed to come out on top. This next one ends the Phantom pretty quickly, so we're able to just get a shot off while they have pretty low health, and then we here have a host that is running quite a low vigor build, so this one wasn't too much of a challenge. We can see, I missed this first shot here, but we'll skip ahead a little bit and come into another moment where I am able to actually connect a shot, and, you know, landing around 620 damage does almost all their HP. So they were, you know, quite damaging in the amount of power they had with their weapons, but I just kind of messed around with them and do manage to parry them for 750 HP. So coming out on top there is just kind of a nice parry and a fun moment to kind of mess around with an opponent there. So here we do have an invasion where another Greatbow user is in the mix, and I was really happy to kind of have this cover of the kind of fog and the snow, but there is also a Rune Bear. So Rune Bears are pretty terrifying. They are, you know, an apex predator that survived the shattering of the ring extinction basically unchanged for 5,000 years. So definitely on my top 3 list of greatest fears, but that's all right. In this case, we're able to let the Rune Bear take care of the host, and then we get out there as quickly as possible, just because, you know, we don't want to be messing with an apex predator like a Rune Bear. So next up, we have another invasion at the Halig Tree, and I found that I got quite a few Halig Tree invasions, and this area proved to be fairly beneficial for running this build. There's a lot of vertical space that you can use and a lot of corners you can use, and also some pretty strong PvE, which is extremely helpful in some cases. So at this point, we just have the host in view, but there is a Phantom in the world, so I'm seeing if I can get some kind of corner shots with the Golem arrows and just kind of knock the host to the ground. There's definitely some more clipping of space around corners than I was aware of, so that was something I found out. Like, I would shoot at a tree right next to the tree and it would still kind of hit this invisible space next to the tree. So the hitboxes around trees and corners and stuff were not perfect, which you know, I guess is not too surprising, but it was just something I discovered in the process of this build. And the Phantom does come into play now, and I switch over to the Sterling Archer build and start going for the Ash of War. It is not super successful. They're not running in the way that I hoped they would, and there's still continuous pressure with the mage from behind, so that doesn't really give me a good opportunity to use Rain of Arrows, but I've baited the host forward enough so that PvE is now in the mix. So here, once the mage is kind of alone, they're not getting the assistance from the host, I'm able to land Rain of Arrows, but at this point out of FP and kind of can't catch up to anybody, so that is the downside of Iron Jar Aerobatic, is that it's extremely slow. If I did want to, I could put Bloodhound Step on, you know, one of the daggers or something that would allow me to be a little bit more mobile with it, but I didn't want to really incorporate that. I didn't feel like that was, you know, on par for this particular build. So I do finally have the Iron Jar Aromatic wear off, and now with the help of PvE, I'm able to find a good time to go for some some bow attacks, but before I'm able to get the shot off, the PvE does the rest. So now things are just a little bit more tense with the host. They're running in and trying to go for attacks. I'm trying to knock them out of those attacks before they're able to deliver them, and the PvE is still kind of a menace, but eventually the host is able to resummon before I'm able to do too much damage with the arrows. So now that the Phantom is kind of coming back into the world, I'm a little bit worried here, and the PvE is certainly helping, but I get very low health, and with that very low health, I'm hoping that the Phantom will be pretty aggressive, and I go to an area with some of the most dangerous PvE, and the Phantom rather, doesn't know that I have actually 2 heals. So as soon as the Phantom follows me into kind of this lion's den of PvE, I just go ahead and heal, and they're not really a factor anymore. And eventually it is just me and the host again, and I go for a parry there that didn't connect, but I'm, you know, happy to try it again, and this time it does connect. I know that the burst damage of a parry is likely going to be my best bet here, and it doesn't do quite all their health, but I'm able to run in and just get a nice stab with the Misericord before they get away. So a fun little 2v1, and one that involved quite a bit of PvE, but I think, you know, the situation kind of called for it. Next up we have a 3v1. It's kind of a 2v1, and you'll see why later. And we do get some chip damage with the Greatbow. We're going for some direct hits with the Radon Spear arrows, and we're getting hit with some bleed damage from the Winged Scythe, which is a little bit scary. And we also have some more blood loss in the mix. I believe this was one of the first invasions with this build, so I was still kind of getting the parry timing down, and I thought what better weapon to do it against? Rivers of Blood is the perfect parry tool. So, you know, they go for Rivers of Blood for maybe the 14th time, and I'm able to land a parry eventually and just end that Phantom with that riposte. And then we do have another Phantom that comes into the world. I switch over to the pulley crossbow and just get a little chip damage in on the host, and the other Phantom has kind of stopped playing. So the imps come in and just help me out there. I definitely would have named that imp Woodhouse just for how helpful it was. And we do have just kind of the chase down that begins with the host. So I'm seeing if I can get a nice headshot there, but they kind of get out of the spot in kind of just in time. So I do manage to deliver a hit. It's, you know, kind of a trade, but then before they're able to attack again, I hit them kind of square in the chest and come out on top. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. I appreciate everybody's support. And if you have questions about the build or recommendations for future builds, I'd love to hear about those in the comments. And that's pretty much all I've got. So thanks so much and have a good one.